Yo, 2007 Cadillac Escalade. I'm going to do some front end parts on this thing. I'm going to show you how I shake this thing down to find bad front end parts. First thing you got to do is get the thing up in the air, and you grab the top and the bottom of the tire and you just push and pull on it just a little bit to see if this wheel bearing's loose and it's nice and tight. I can actually pull and push on it a little bit more, and I'm getting a little lower ball joint movement. I can see it and feel it right here. I can give it side to side movement. Put my hands on horizontally on the tires. I can feel something else that's loose. I think it's this inner tie rod. I can actually grab this tie rod and pull back on it, and the play goes away, and I let go, and it's there. So I know this inner tie rod's loose. Outer tie rod feels okay. I got a torn CV axle boot too, so it's a good time to replace that since I'm doing all these front end parts to it. Now on the driver's side, I can push and pull on the top and bottom of the tire, and it's real nice and tight. Side to side, it's real nice and tight. I don't feel any play in there, so I know the wheel bearing's good. But I'm not done yet. One more thing I got to do to check these lower ball joints and upper ball joints is I want to load the suspension. So I put jack stands under here, and I lowered the whole car on the ground so the back tires are on the ground. And I want to keep these jack stands as far out on the lower control arms as possible, because it'll give me as much movement out of them as possible. If I go in too far, these control arms won't even move. Now that the suspension's loaded, I can push in on the tire, and that's all upper ball joint. It's super loose. And that ball joint doesn't move when the suspension is unloaded, when the control arms are all the way down, because you're forcing the ball joint out so you can't get it to move. And on this lower ball joint, I can't feel any movement from side to side. But if I put a big pry bar under the tire and lift up, there's quite a bit of movement and deflection in it. You can have a little bit of deflection on these, but I'm going to call that really excessive. I actually did front pads and rotors to this about a week ago because it was grinding and I had to be the bearer of bad news. So I mail ordered a bunch of parts. I got one CV axle, 2 lower ball joints, 1 inner tie rod, and 1 upper control arm. You can't just do upper ball joints on these. You got to replace a whole control arm. I guess I'll do the driver's side first. Get this ABS wire out of my way. 10mm for this leveler and this brake hose. This thing is going to need an alignment after I get done with all these front end parts. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to get this as close as I can. I'm just going to mark these bushings. Try to get them in the same spot. There's little knockouts right here that are still in here, so it should pretty much go back the same way I took it out. Yeah, these little plastic things right here, these are the factory knockouts. They put those in after they get done adjusting it to make sure it doesn't move. That should be good enough. I can get a pry bar in here and just pull these calipers in a little bit. These caliper bolts are an 18mm. I'm going to find a good place to hang this. I'm going to take these pads out so they don't fall out while I'm working on this car. I'm going to loosen this nut and push it in just to make sure this axle doesn't pull out. 36mm. There's a washer in here I'm going to take out. And I'm just going to lightly tap on this. That way I know that axle's not going to pull apart on me. Get this cotter pin out. This should be a 24 millimeter. 18 on this upper, I think. Now there's two ways to separate these ball joints. Either you can whack this really hard with a hammer a bunch of times, a really big hammer here and here until they fall out. Or you can use a ball joint separator. I'm really fond of hammers, but I'm going to use a ball joint separator anyways. Pickle fork. Ah, that's not working for me. Uh-oh, everything's stuck. That didn't hurt. I don't think that wrecked anything. Oh, that's pretty heavy, but I really didn't want that to happen, but whatever. Get that half shaft out of the way. I got a clip I got to take out of here. Just want to make sure it's loose. Take that off. These lower ball joints I can just hammer out. You just got to make sure not to hit the edge, because if you hit the edge it'll mushroom it out. I'm just going to bust this grease zerk off. Take a ball peen and a hammer. It's not moving. There, it's going now. Watch your toes. Clean a little bit of scale off of that because I can. These ball joints were packaged with the boot on it and I got to take it off. You need a ball joint press to put these in. You can either buy one or rent one. Parts stores usually always rent them. Just going to kind of start that a little bit. There's a few different assortments in these ball joint presses. This one seems like it's going to work good for me. There's a 21 millimeter on this. I'm going to use an impact. You just want to go real slow at first and make sure it's square. If it goes in crooked, you gotta correct it somehow. These usually go in nice and square. And before you unbolt this, you got to clamp nice and tight. You want to whack this a couple of times and make sure that this ball joint is seated all the way. That's all it takes. It should be in there all the way. And the boot thing. And the clippy thing. I'm going to put some grease in this before I even put the thing on. Just going to kind of pinch this a little bit and I'll feel the grease going through. Okay, I got it going all the way through. Now for these upper control arms, these are 21 millimeters and sometimes this coil spring gets in the way of the bolts. And if they are, a lot of times you can get away with not taking any of this off and just take out the bolt you can get out, and then the other one will come out a lot easier. And of course, turn the nut and not the bolt, because the bolt's got a flat on it to work these eccentrics. Sometimes they fall out. That one might stay in there. So I want to make sure this one's on the rear. When you put the control arms back on too, you want it basically the same height as when you took it off. So you don't want it way up here or all the way down. You want it right where you took it off so the bushings don't turn too much. They're going to be in the right location this way. I could even measure it if I wanted to. Look, I got 4 fingers right there. That's good enough. So that's where I'll put it. Get a little pry bar action and pull this thing out. Put a little alignment punch in the hole, hopefully to get this to line up real nice. Make sure I got my 4 fingers. I don't know what the torque is on these. I just get them good and squished, nice and tight, because you don't want these to move. You definitely don't want these to move. Then Humpty Dumpty can go back together again. I did push this, I did turn this tie rod all the way in too, so the shaft on the rack and pinion is in as far as it can go. Somebody might tell me that's a bad idea, but I've done this so many times I haven't hurt one yet. And if you really want to support it somehow, you can do it. Stick it in the axle. I'm going to start this bottom bolt first. I'm just going to slam all this together now. If you want to use factory torque specs, you're going to have to look all this up. Got a little grease on the rotor. That's never a good thing. A little brake cleaner will get that off. The little clip broke. I'm going to have to zip tie that down. That's it for this side. I'm going to do this inner tie rod next. Got a chalk pencil here. I'm just going to kind of scribe a line. I don't know why. I probably don't need to. 24 millimeter on this jam nut. 24 millimeter here. Hit this with a hammer a couple of times. Yeah, he's got to do an alignment, but I'm going to do a thread count anyways because I want to put the same amount of threads on it when I put this on, so it gets pretty close until he gets in alignment. So I got 21 1/4 turns. Thankfully this nut's coming off real nice. There's a pinch clamp here I can take off. There's a band clamp on this bellows boot in the back. A lot of people break these and just put a zip tie on here when you put it back on. I'm just going to get in here with a long Phillips screwdriver, like so, and just pound on it. And it usually pops it off. Once in a while I can reuse this thing. I can fix it. There's supposed to be a little tab on here. This one busted off though, so I can't use it. Once in a while these leak from about 10-15 years of seepage, so I put a drain pan down on the floor because it might leak a little old fluid out of it. Just pull it out. Yank it all out. I have an inner tie rod tool, but none of the fittings are big enough for this. So I can make quick work out of this with a big pipe wrench. It's extremely loose. I'm going to hit this with some brake cleaner and get the oil out of the threads. That way I can put a little Loctite on these threads for some extra insurance. A lot of these come with a little packet of grease, and if you get it, you want to put it in here. This one's already greased though. Then this excess grease I can just pack in here just for fun as best as I can. Like that. Then I can put a zip tie on it. Do my 21 1/4 turns. Before I put this back on the knuckle, I'm going to try to get this half shaft out of here. Normally you'd want to unbolt this sway bar link or the shock to get it out. I might be able to do something a little different because I'm taking the lower ball joint out. I don't know. I'm just going to wing it. All these CV axle nuts are 15 millimeter. Some of these GMs, that's all you have to do and this thing will fly right out of here, but I got a feeling That's not going to happen with this truck. Oh heck no, everything's in the way. I could just take out the strut to get this axle out. There's just 2 bolts down on the bottom and 3 on the top, and the strut comes right out. But since I got to do this lower ball joint, I'm just going to do the same on this side as what I did to the other side. I'm going to use my brains for something other than a paperweight this time. And leave the nuts on it so this knuckle doesn't fall down on the floor. The top one popped, and that's good. I didn't want to use a pickle fork on it because I'd end up tearing that boot. This whole spindle's gonna come off. Okay, you're not fun. It's stuck. Ooh, ooh. Heavy damn stuff. Heavy duty. And somehow I can get this out, I think. Somehow, maybe. Maybe, somehow. Maybe. And I'll just do the same stuff I did to the other side until it comes time to put that axle back in. I just got to be kind of careful not to tear these CV boots on like these little sharp spots here when I cram this thing back in here. I don't know what the torque is on these either. If you're doing an axle, you might want to look it up. I'm just going to go in a star pattern like doing a tire. Now I can just put the rest of this crap on. Try not to give myself a hernia, because this thing weighs a friggin' ton. Can't forget to tighten up the jam nut. I also greased all of these fittings on both sides. I suppose before I end this video, I'm going to do a little ghetto alignment. It's never going to be right. He's going to need a wheel alignment. But I went and test drove the car, and the steering wheel is just a little bit to the right. And I'm going to adjust this tie rod on the right side. So if it's taking a right, then that means I want to adjust this so the steering wheel goes more to the right. So I'm going to want the tire to go out. And that'll actually steer it more to the right on the passenger side. And what that's going to do is make the steering wheel go left. So I put a mark on here. I'm going to want to make this longer. I'm just going to turn it 1 turn. And it's going to be close enough. You'll probably have a centered steering wheel. And there it is. The Ghetto alignment. Okay, bye.